Luke chapter 6, verse 12, all very similar passages, recording different instances where Jesus does the following. Chapter 6, verse 46 in Mark. Let's see, 6:46. Can't see, my eyes are bad. There it is. Immediately he made the disciples get into a boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, where he dismissed the crowd. And after he had taken leave of them, he went up on the mountain to pray. In Mark chapter 1, verse 35, it says, he woke up before it was light, and he withdrew to a lonely place to pray. Before he chose his disciples, it records in Matthew chapter 4 that he was fasting and praying for 40 days in the wilderness, and then he calls his disciples. He did nothing apart from deep, abiding prayer. Not, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take, which is a terrifying prayer to take. Teach a child, by the way.
You mean that he's going to take me in the middle of the night? So I'm praying that if in the event he's...
Yes, that's what we're praying, so let's do this. Now, this is real, abiding, conversational prayer where I know the Lord's will, I know his heart. I want to, Lord, what is your heart? Show me your will. Give me the courage. Give me the grace. Give me the strength to walk in your ways. Feed me so that I may do your will. Make your name holy in my life. Make your name holy in my home. Make your name holy in this community. May your will be done on earth just as it is in heaven. That's my consuming, passionate desire, God. Lord, what do you want me to do with my life? What would you want me to do today? What would you have me do as I interact with my coworker? What would you have me do as I interact with my spouse? What would you have me do as I interact with my child? What would you have me do as I interact with my neighbors? What would you have me do as I live my life? That's real abiding prayer. And he will speak to you. And he will speak to me, just as he spoke to his son. That's the kind of intimacy and that's the kind of fellowship that he desires for us to have. Yes, you read it correctly. Fasting. Before Jesus went public with his ministry, he fasted for 40 days continually. And then in the Sermon on the Mount, as he's teaching, he says, teaching the people not to fall into hypocrisy, he says concerning prayer, when you pray, do it this way. When you give, do it this way. And when you fast, don't do this, but do this. Well, what does that assume? He didn't say, if you fast. He said, when you fast, do it this way. Does anybody ever fast? Don't raise your hand if you do, by the way. Or otherwise, you just blew the whole thing for Jesus. That's exactly what he's saying. Don't tell people about it. It's a rhetorical question. The answer to that question is rarely, if ever. From a period from the 1800s to about 1950-some, there were a total of about 2 or 3 books written on the subject. Obviously, it's not a very popular subject. But everybody in Jesus' day fasted. It was a universally accepted common thing. Now, we don't have any idea what that means. What for? So I'm supposed to go hungry. That makes me spiritual? I don't get it. I can read and pray on a full stomach actually better than I can on an empty stomach, so I don't get it. That's why we have to devote a whole sermon to it. It's a subject that not a whole lot of people know anything about, but the Old Testament and the New speaks to. Nowhere is it commanded, but it speaks to it continually. Jesus fasted. The disciples fasted. They fasted after he ascended into heaven. The question is why? What good does that do? We'll get to that. Obedience. This is obviously important. Should go without saying, but it can't go without saying. Verse 34 of John chapter 4. Jesus is sitting down in John chapter 4 with a woman at the well, and the disciples had gone, hadn't caught up to him yet, or they'd gone into town to get food, and here they come back, and here he was talking to this this sinful Samaritan woman, and they're all freaked out because he hasn't eaten for a while. And they're like, Jesus, you got to eat something. You got to eat something. You know, you're working too hard. You're doing too much. You don't need to be talking to her anyway. She's Samaritan and a woman. She's doubly cursed. So don't talk to her. Come away and have a Whopper with us. Okay, we got the fries. We got the Happy Meal. Let's sit down and eat. He says, you guys don't have a clue, do you? I have food that you know nothing of. And they immediately said, did he go? I didn't see the Burger King on the way. He must have got some food. And they said, He says, my food is to do the will of my Father in heaven. Jesus says, I only do what my Father wills. I only do what my Father wills? Pretty much, that's it. I only do what my Father wills. Obedience. Obedience is a spiritual discipline. Now there's others. There's fellowship. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 34 says, do not, is it 24? 24, do not neglect meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but meet together and continually and encourage one another, all the more so until you see the day approaching. Spur one another on towards love and good deeds. What does that mean? It means that you can't practice the spiritual disciplines alone. Oh, you can, and good luck with that, because you won't succeed. That's why we are knit together in one body called the body of Christ, which is his bride and his church. You can't do the spiritual disciplines alone, or at least not do them well. And there's others that can be branched out of each of those. There's corporate prayer, there's private prayer, there's meditating on the Word, there's memorizing the Word, there's studying the Word. So there's at least 4 that we're going to cover, specifically or as we go through 1 John. But those are the things that we do in order to abide. Objection, but I'm not disciplined. How many of you don't feel like you're very disciplined? Just raise your hand. Be honest. Excellent. We only have about 3 people who aren't disciplined. Super. This ought to be a breeze then. I'm just going to assume that most of you aren't disciplined to raise your hand. So let's just assume that for the most part, most of us don't feel like we are incredibly disciplined. And we look at that and think, oh man, that looks like work. And I don't even like work. So I'm not sure how this is going to work. So how do we do this? First of all, I would like to point out that everybody is disciplined. Everybody in this room is incredibly disciplined to do that which they love. In about 3 hours from now, at least 50 of the men here will discipline themselves to sit in one place for 8 continual hours and only get up to go to the bathroom or to eat, because they are so disciplined to watch grown men run around with helmets on chasing a football. That's discipline. It requires discipline. Last Wednesday, I took a half day, and I exercised extreme discipline as I sat outside in a ground blind without insulated camo in 40-mile-an-hour winds from 11:30 until it got dark in the same place. That's discipline. Seeing nothing. Because I am disciplined. I have other friends who have, in the last week, gone out in pitch darkness to climb up into a tree dressed as a tree, to sit in that same tree until the sun goes down. That's discipline. There are women who will go to a mall and walk and walk and stop and walk and stop and walk and stop and walk and buy nothing and stop and walk and shift and move dresses and look for bargains and buy nothing and then go to this store and that store. And their husbands will say, how are you so disciplined? I love to shop. He loves to hunt, she loves to shop.